The snow outside the terminal pushed against the glass like waves of white, turning Christmas Eve travel into a long, crowded test of patience. People shifted in lines, rubbing cold hands together, staring at departure boards that kept flipping to delayed. Voices rose and fell with holiday stress. Parents calming children, couples whispering frustrations, everyone just trying to make it home. Through the noise and winter lights, Staff Sergeant Emily Ward stepped into the gate area. She looked like someone who had traveled a long road alone. Plain hoodie, worn boots, jeans faded from real miles, and a weather duffel hanging from her shoulder. On that duffel, barely noticeable, was a small faded patch, one from a special operations task force known only to those who had been there when the night turned unforgiving. 3 college kids near the gate noticed her immediately. One smirked, calling her basically homeless. Another laughed that she looked like someone who couldn't pass basic training. The third shook his head, saying she was definitely not military. Emily didn't flinch. She stood quiet, steady, carrying herself with a calm that didn't need defending. Just a few feet away, Chief Petty Officer Ryan Brooks, a Navy SEAL on standby orders, lifted his eyes. He had heard every word. He glanced at her duffel, saw the patch, and froze. Viewers, if you respect those who carried the weight so others could come home for Christmas, offer a silent salute in the comments before the truth comes out. Emily shifted her weight slightly as the line inched forward. The old habits settling into place without thought. Every doorway, every exit, every corner of the terminal had already been mapped in her mind the moment she stepped inside. It was the kind of awareness you never unlearn once you've carried it through the dust and fire of Afghanistan. Once you've stood in the alleys of Remini, hearing distant echoes that could turn deadly in a heartbeat. Years ago, she had been attached to a Joint Special Operations Task Force, a role earned quietly and carried even more quietly. No spotlight, no celebration, just long nights, hard missions, and promises kept in places most Americans would never see on a map. She had been out of uniform for 2 years now, learning how to walk through a world that moved softer than the one she left behind. She lived quietly in a small rented place outside town, working odd jobs that let her keep to herself. The shadows she carried weren't visible, but they pressed against her ribs in moments like this. Crowds, noise, the kind of chaos that made her heartbeat tighten until she forced it steady again. This Christmas was different, though. It would be her first time going home in years. Her father's voice on the phone had been warm and trembling, telling her the porch light would stay on the whole night. She held that promise closer than any gift. But the trio near her didn't see any of that. They saw only what they wanted to see. The varsity jacket kid nudged his friend and pointed at her duffel. "Look at that thing," he whispered loudly. "A thrift store fossil, it smells like basement." The girl with the phone tilted her head, pretending to examine Emily from top to bottom. "I swear she looks like someone who failed basic training." Did she even try? She laughed at her own comment, tapping something on her screen. The third, holding a camera on a small handle, smirked into the lens. "Definitely never seen real action. She probably just wants attention." Their voices carried just enough for Emily to hear. She didn't react. No shift in her breathing, no tightening of her shoulders, no flash of irritation. She simply kept her grip on her boarding pass light and her eyes soft, watching the flow of people, the holiday decorations, the terminal staff trying to move the crowd along. Her calm wasn't weakness. It was practiced, lived in discipline, the kind that had helped her keep her team alive on nights when the world turned black and unforgiving. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Brooks observed her from a short distance away, not for gossip or curiosity, but because something in her stillness pulled at his memory. He had seen that kind of posture before. Feet planted but relaxed, shoulders lowered just enough to conserve energy, not enough to show vulnerability. Hands steady, eyes trained in patterns. Even the way she shifted her stance to ease pressure off an old hip injury told a story without sound. He had served with women and men who carry themselves like that. Operators, professionals, people who had lived through the kind of nights that carved respect into bone. He watched her hands, especially the way her fingers rested near the duffel strap, the slight flex as the trio grew louder. Not defensive, just ready, controlled. Brooks had spent enough years in uniform, deployed enough times alongside Rangers, Marines, Special Forces, and attached personnel to recognize the difference between someone pretending and someone trained. Emily wasn't pretending anything. If anything, she seemed to be trying to disappear into the flow of people. He kept his distance. He didn't call her out. Didn't ask her about the patch yet. Didn't break the silence she seemed to be guarding like armor. Some veterans don't want to be recognized at all. Some live quieter lives by choice, not by fear. And Brooks respected that deeply. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he knew the story behind that patch, one earned by only a handful of people on a night that still echoed in shared memories. So he watched quietly, respectfully, waiting to see if she wanted to stand entirely alone or if the moment would demand something else. The line barely moved at all. People shifted from one foot to the other, sighing loudly as another delay announcement crackled through the speakers. The frustration in the crowd felt thick, rising like steam from a pot left too long on the stove. With every minute, the holiday impatience grew sharper. The trio behind Emily seemed to drink that tension like fuel. The varsity jacket kid leaned forward again, staring at her duffel like it personally offended him. Seriously, he said to his friends, this old thing needs to retire just like her. He reached out and pinched the strap lightly between two fingers, shaking it in a mocking rhythm. Emily stepped back instantly, the movement small but precise. Please don't touch the bag, she said quietly. Her voice wasn't sharp, wasn't loud, but it carried a firmness that left no room for argument. The girl snorted, tilting her head with exaggerated attitude. Relax. You act like you're guarding national secrets or something. She crossed her arms. Look at the way she stands. Like those mall security guards who pretend they're special forces. The third one lifted his phone, angling it just enough to capture Emily's face and her duffel. Bro, this is gold. She probably practices saluting in the mirror. Their laughter rose again, careless and loud, rolling through the waiting area like it belonged there. A few passengers glanced over, but nobody stepped in. Holiday travel made people keep their heads down, minds focused on getting home. Conflict felt like another delay they didn't want to deal with. Brooks felt his jaw tighten. He, clear his throat, shifted his weight one subtle step forward, staying in her peripheral but not intruding. Years of training sat coiled inside him. The instinct to intervene, ready to break the surface. But he also knew there was a boundary. Some veterans chose to fight battles only when absolutely necessary. And he didn't want to take that choice away from her. Emily didn't look at the trio. Not once. She kept her gaze on the gate, the scan of her surroundings steady. But her silence wasn't fear. It was composure. The kind learned not in classrooms, but in dust-filled nights where sound traveled too far, and staying quiet kept people alive. The girl leaned closer, voice high and sharp. Too scared to say anything louder. Figures fake tough. Emily exhaled slowly through her nose, grounding herself. But inside her chest, something cooled. Not anger memory. The terminal around her faded for a moment. The bright Christmas decorations dulled, replaced by cold wind-carved mountains. The distant murmur of passengers became the low thump of rotor blades cutting frozen Afghan air. Christmas Eve, a night she had tried not to revisit, but one that never truly left her. Snow mixed with sand that night. It didn't fall from the sky. It blew sideways, slicing across exposed skin like glass. The wind howled over the ridgy lines, carrying distant cracks of gunfire in uneven patterns. Her hands had been numb inside her gloves, her breath sharp from the altitude. She still remembered the red glow of a tracer round slicing past the shoulder of the ranger ahead of her. She remembered the radio static, the voice whispering. They were pinned down and running out of options. She had been part of the small team scrambling across those rocks to reach trapped rangers who were surrounded by fighters using the darkness as cover. The mission wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't supposed to succeed. But there had been no choice. Lives hung in the thin winter air, and Emily had moved with purpose, guiding wounded rangers down the ridge under fire. The patch on her duffel had been stitched onto her gear the next morning, not as a reward, but as a reminder of the night that got every person out alive. Her fingers brushed the strap of the bag now, not protectively, but in quiet acknowledgement. The presence snapped back into focus when the guy tugged at the strap again, testing her patience, almost daring her to react. Emily stepped back another inch more forcefully this time. Brooks shifted again. His posture changed, barely noticeable to anyone else, but unmistakable to someone who had lived the same life. He was preparing to step in. His eyes had sharpened the moment he saw that patch, the faded emblem that only a small number of operators had ever earned. It wasn't something you found in surplus stores. It marked a night when everything went wrong and a handful of people refused to break. The girl lifted her phone now, turning it toward Emily. "Smile for the vlog," she said. Emily kept her posture steady, refusing to give them anything. The varsity jacket kid elbowed his friend. "Dude, record this." Maybe she'll freak out. Brooks felt something twist in his chest. He had seen people talk like this before, people who mocked what they didn't understand, who built their confidence by tearing down others. But seeing it aimed at someone who had carried frostbitten rangers on her back through enemy fire, someone who had risked her life on a night most Americans were wrapping gifts, it made something old and protective rise in him like a tide. He took a slow inhale, grounding himself the same way he would before breaching a room. His heartbeat stayed even. His eyes stayed focused. He was close enough now to read the details on her duffel patch. Clearly close enough to see the slight tear on the edge where the stitching had frayed after too many deployments. He knew exactly what that patch meant, and more importantly, he remembered what had happened the night she earned it. He had been in a separate unit supporting that mission. Every operator in that region had heard about the rescue. A small team, outnumbered, in brutal winter conditions, fighting mile after mile to bring home men who thought they'd never see morning again. And here she was standing quietly in an airport line while strangers mocked her for wearing clothes that didn't match their expectations. The trio laughed again and the sound cut across the terminal like something sharp. Brooks clenched his jaw. He could feel the tension wrapping itself around the moment like a fist tightening. The line moved forward by one small step, but no one could feel relief yet because something was about to shift. He didn't know when. He didn't know how, but he knew the truth was coming. And when it did, the laughter of those three kids would stop cold. And Emily Ward, trying so hard to stay invisible, would no longer be able to hide who she really was. Brooks kept himself just far enough away to avoid crowding her, but close enough to see the details that most people would overlook. The trio's laughter still floated through the air, but his attention had narrowed onto something far more important, her posture. Emily stood with her feet planted evenly, weight balanced, neither leaning nor fidgeting. Civilians shifted constantly, bouncing from heel to toe or crossing arms, but she remained centered in a way he had only seen from those trained to respond fast without wasting motion. Every few seconds, her eyes moved. Not to glare at the college kids, not to acknowledge the stares. They traced routes. They scanned corners. They followed gap openings in the crowd, emergency exits, the walking pace of gate agents. She tracked potential threats, not faces, and she did it so smoothly most people would think she was just bored. Brooks recognized it instantly. Her left sleeve slipped back for a moment as she adjusted her bag, revealing a faint set of scars near her forearm. Small, pale lines, the kind left by shrapnel or fragments. They weren't large, but they were old, healed by time rather than medical stitching. She pulled the sleeve back down without thinking, covering them with the soft reflex of someone who didn't care for questions. Her grip on her boarding pass remained steady, not tight, not nervous, just controlled. The way someone grips identification during chaotic moments in foreign airports, checking it only when needed, but never losing track of it. Even the way she held the corner between thumb and first two fingers looked tactical, intentional, clean. Another announcement echoed overhead, and an elderly couple struggled with an overstead carry-on near the row of seats. The husband tugged it futilely, his hand shaking slightly from age. Without a word, Emily stepped forward, crouched smoothly, lifted the bag with a steady motion, and placed it on the seat for them. She did it quietly, gently, without making eye contact longer than necessary. Then she stepped back into line as if she'd done nothing at all. The wife smiled warmly, and reached out to touch Emily's arm, thanking her. Emily nodded once, small, respectful, and returned to her position. It happened so naturally, so quietly that the trio should have been embarrassed into silence. But they weren't. The girl scoffed loudly, nudging her friends. "Oh, look. She's trying to look nice for attention now. Bet she wants someone to think she's important," the guy with the camera snickered. "Probably hopes someone says, 'Thank you for your service.'" Their laughter rippled again, but something in the air changed. A businessman in a long coat typing on his laptop nearby paused mid-keystroke. He glanced at Emily, not with ridicule, not with sympathy, but with a subtle sense of unease, not fear, just recognition that her silence was deeper than humiliation. Her stillness too sharp to be ordinary. Something in her reminded him of people he'd met once before. People who had been through enough to walk gently because they understood the cost of walking hard. Brooks saw that reaction. It confirmed what he already knew. Even civilians could sense there was something unusual about her. Then something else caught his eye. Something so small and faint that anyone without his experience would have missed it completely. As Emily shifted her sleeve again, settling her wrist, he saw a tiny dark line near her inner forearm, barely visible. Subdued ink placed intentionally where only those who know would ever notice it. A Ranger tab, not the big, bold version soldiers sometimes displayed with pride. This one was minimalist, almost hidden, tucked away like a private memory, the kind operators chose when they wanted the honor but not the attention. A tattoo placed not to be shown off, but to be carried quietly. Brooks's heartbeat kicked once hard. There it was, the final confirmation. The patch, the scars, the stance, the reflexes, the silence. It all aligned. And now the tattoo tied every thread together. She wasn't just a veteran. She wasn't just someone who had served. She had worked alongside Rangers. She had been on missions that required more than standard training. She had stood in places where you either learned discipline or you didn't come home. The trio laughed again, clueless and comfortable, their voices bouncing against the holiday decorations and glass windows. But Brooks no longer heard them. He was staring at Emily with the realization that she wasn't just familiar. She was connected to one of the most brutal Christmas Eve rescue operations he had ever heard about. He exhaled slowly, a calm breath that came from a place deeper than memory. His pulse stayed measured, but something inside him shifted. Respect, recognition, responsibility. Because once you know who someone truly is, you can't stand silent while the world misunderstands them. And he knew Emily Ward now. He knew exactly who she was, even if she was trying and failing to disappear into this airport line like a shadow trying to blend into daylight. Another delay announcement crackled through the speakers. This one longer and more apologetic than the rest. The gate agent's voice trembled slightly as she explained that the aircraft needed another inspection because of icing on the wings. The moment the word sank in, the terminal erupted in groans and frustrated murmurs. A man slapped his ticket against his thigh. A woman muttered that she'd never get home for Christmas. Even the holiday music playing faintly in the background felt tired now, drowned by the rising tension. The trio behind Emily groaned the loudest, complaining that this line is cursed. They weren't looking at her anymore, too absorbed in their own irritation. But something else was about to shift the air around them. A small boy near the seating area was playing with a toy drone his parents had bought him as an early gift. He ran the little device along the floor, making engine noises with his mouth. Then someone bumped into him, and the drone slipped from his hands. It skidded across the tile, rolling toward a row of chairs. Before anyone could react, it hit a metal leg and changed direction, shooting straight toward Emily's ankles. It was a blink, nothing more. The drone hadn't finished its slide when Emily moved. She dropped one hand, shifting her weight with a fluid precision that didn't belong in a civilian airport. Her fingers caught the toy just before it would have slammed into the base of the chair. The movement was clean, fast, perfectly timed. Too fast. She straightened and handed the drone back to the child without a word. The boy beamed, thanking her with shy excitement. His parents nodded gratefully before pulling him back to their seats. For the first time since their mockery began, the college trio fell silent. The girl frowned like she had seen something she couldn't quite explain. The guy with the camera blinked hard, lowering his phone. The varsity jacket kid muttered, "Did you see that?" under his breath. Brooks saw it better than anyone. His eyes widened a fraction. That reaction time wasn't normal. It wasn't casual. It wasn't luck. It was muscle memory trained under pressure. The reflex of someone who had spent years catching more dangerous objects under far worse circumstances. It was the instinct of a professional who had moved through rooms where fractions of seconds mattered. Before he could process it further, a different kind of tension cut through the terminal. A gate agent stepped forward from behind the counter, her voice louder than before. "If there is anyone here with medical training, we need assistance." A sudden hush passed across